Hey guys, FilthyRobot here, bringing you a 50-hour review of Brotato. This is one of the new video formats we're going to try, talking about some of the games that I've spent a little bit more time on. So what is it? On the surface, Brotato is an absurdly titled swarm survivor starring a cute potato in the color purple. But when you look under the hood, it's kind of a hyper deck builder is how I describe it. Super sped up deck builder using items and a battle map instead of cards and encounters. And it's pretty much nonstop tiny build decisions which will impact the outcome of your run and an immediate stress test of those decisions. So make changes, play out in the battle map, make changes, play out in the battle map, rinse, repeat. It's super addictive, very, very fun. I've spent about 50 hours in the game and probably can get another 50 before I put it down. Let me talk about what I like about Brotato. For me, the pacing is spot on. I like the strategy side of this game the most for me. The battle maps are fine, it's a test of the build, and the pacing as it is in the game right now is such that you spend a little bit of time clearing out the map, and then you spend as much time as you'd like upgrading your character in terms of new items and new level ups, etc. And for me, the pacing is just perfect on that. I get to have lots of nice dopamine hits from upgrading my character and building my deck to essentially beat the levels. Second, the game has been bug-free for me. I've played 50 hours. I've had no crashes, no bugs, with the only exception of occasionally I get a small stutter. I don't know how often, maybe once or twice a day, so maybe once every 7 hours or so. I get a small laggy stutter. Don't know what that's from, but I think it is the game. Third, I think the game is pretty well balanced in terms of challenge level. There are 5 ascension levels, which I like. On the 5th ascension level, I am not cleanly clearing the game at all. I often take a number of runs with a specific character to both figure out how these character stats are going to interact with the general strategy, as well as figure out what set of items and other things I want to build into that character. So for me, I like having a game hard enough that I don't win every time, and I don't even win the majority of times in this game. 4, there's tons of stats in this game and tons of items and weapons that utilize these stats in different ways, and character builds that interact with these stats as well, which means that each time I play, it's pretty different in terms of what it comes out with, especially when I change characters. Which brings me to my next point, number 5. There are currently almost 40 characters in the game, with more being added, and the characters are a little hit or miss. Some are exceptional because they totally change the way the game plays because of the modifiers the character does. It might make some stats entirely useless, or change the weighting of certain stats, or just even change the way the character plays entirely. And there are some missed characters, which are just kind of small change characters from the default, which don't do a lot for me, but are still kind of fun to clear out. And there's unlocks tied to each of these characters, so you feel a sense of kind of meta progression as you're doing this, of unlocking new items that added to the rotation and new other ways you can play the game. I think the items in this game are really well done. This is number 6 for me, which are not only the general stat items. Almost all the items in this game have a trade-off. So you're not just pumping a raw stat. You tend to need to sacrifice something else to gain this. And then they also play around with the cost of stats. So for example, there are some high risk, high reward items that might penalize you in the next wave. So you might have a harder next wave, or start with low HP, or generate more enemies across the course of the run with an upside of either cheap stats for their normal cost, or just better economy long term because you can handle more enemies, or this type of thing. I think that's a smart way to do it. It makes for fun builds because there's trade-offs associated with it, and you take risks, and you often get penalized from taking your risks, which is fun. 7, the bosses and elites I think are pretty nice for me. They're not super different, but they change the way the games play. The game tells you when there's going to be elites or bosses on certain waves, and those waves play differently for me than the previous waves, and you do need to power spike for those waves and pay attention to the fact that you will have bosses and elites on those waves, which I think is great. 8, I like the graphics in this game. I think they're very clean, very clear by and large, and I think it's super cute that your little potato, as you buy equipment, equips that equipment. So I might be running around with a potato wielding 6 swords and an plate mail, where it started off as just this white generic potato, and now it's a decked out potato, which is super cool. 9. It has tons of replayability, in part from all the stuff I've talked about previously, and also in part because you can't force any given build, because there's the RNG element of this, of what items show up in your run, and you're adapting to those items that show up. There's a lot of replayability just from that location. That's pretty cool as well. 10, it's got really nice quality of life features in there. Some of my favorites just off the top of my head are damage tracking on items. So when you have an item, you can see how it performs at the end of each wave by taking a look at the item and hovering it, and it will show you how much damage it's done. You can compare it to your other items. This is true of both items and weapons, which are two different things in this game. And then I just like quality of life things like if I click out of the game when I'm playing it, it auto pauses the game for me. So if I'm tabbing into my stream, I don't even have to do anything. It just auto pauses the game, which is super, super nice. 11. It is dirt cheap. It's $4.99 right now, and I've got 50 hours out of it so far, which means I'm paying about 10 cents an hour for this game right now. And I'm enjoying the hell out of it, and it's cheap, so that's a win-win for me. Let me talk a little bit about a couple of the things I'd like to see changed in the game. I think that currently the tooltips are not well done. There are not good explanations for a number of the things in the game I'd like to see, especially gameplay options that change the way the game highlights and displays a little bit. Those would be nice to have updated. I'd like to see a bestiary. There's a fair number of different enemies in this game, and they all do different things, but you don't really get to understand what those things are until either you've had a long conversation with chat, access to Wikipedia, or just really good at pattern matching. It took me like 20 hours before I realized one of these enemies that I was killing actually spawned 3 more enemies when it died, and I should try to avoid that enemy, killing that enemy, until I'm ready to take those extra enemies. Okay, I didn't know that. Why don't I know that? Because there's no tooltips anywhere in the game that display what the enemies do. It would be nice to see their max HP when you killed them enough, so you know what the breakpoints are for your weapons that you're building. It'd be nice to see how they behave, if there's behaviors to be learned, so you can build around them. I'd like to see item scaling info a little bit too. Some of the weapons have hidden scaling modifications, like as they upgrade in tier and quality, they change how they interact with certain stats, and you don't know that until you built them. Again, seems like something that should be in the base game for information for me. In that same vein, I'd like the set bonuses. It's cool there are set bonuses, but I'd like those set bonuses to be a bit more transformative. It'd be interesting to want to mix and match some full sets, to have like 2 full sets because you want these 2 set bonuses that do a thing. I think it would add some more replayability to the game. And then finally, I'd like to see some changes with the map and enemy diversity. The map is pretty basic and remains pretty basic all the way through, and the boss diversity is pretty minimal. There's only a couple different bosses. They mostly show up at the same times. You're always seeing the same thing there. It'd kind of be nice to have that be a little bit different, so you couldn't exactly build for that. But these are all pretty minor criticisms of a great game, and this is early access, so I'm actually expecting quite a few of these to be changed before it comes out, and it seems good to me. So for me, Brotato is an A, which is my second highest rating. It needs some small kind of quality of life improvements that it will likely reach before it releases, and it's not a forever game. But other than that, man, what a great game. Super fun, super addictive, lots of things to do in it, very replayable, just not infinitely replayable, and very, very fun.